City of Stevens Point Board of Park Commissioners meeting, recorded February 12, 2025.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Board of Park Commissioners February 12, 2025 meeting. Just some housekeeping situation here. So once we go through the roll call, the board will go through the first 5 items here. When it comes to the discussion of the master plan for Goerke and Zenoff Parks, Director Kramer will go through it first, and then we'll open it up to the Board of Commissioners. Then I'll open up to anybody that would like to speak. We'll have limited for 3 minutes. At that time, if you would give your name and address at the podium, and we'll go through there. And then we'll come back to the Board of Commissioners again for decision. So, roll call.
Alder Broderick.
Here.
Alder Boozy.
Here.
Freckman.
Here.
Disher. Here. Ledusky.
Here.
Alder Kiemer.
Here.
McDonald.
Here.
O'Connor.
Here.
Shabilsky.
Here.
I may warm me up some egg roll in a bowl.
Sorensen.
Here.
And Wynn.
Here.
All right. Item number 2, approval of the January 8th, 2024 meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Otherwise, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3, presentation of the Stevens Point Forestry Department Management Plan by Wachtel Tree Service.
I can start this here. Park Commissioners, you're all aware, the last time we did a forestry management plan was 2010. So if you recall, Superintendent Ernster had written a grant successfully through the DNR to do an update to our plan. Through that selection process, Wachtel Tree Science was who was actually selected. This originally was due for end of 24, but just due to some of the planning credentials and some of the rewrites we did, revisions at the end, it first came out and was ready for this month's meeting. So we do have Nathan on remotely due to some of the weather. He's going to go ahead and kind of run through a synopsis of it, presentation. Certainly, if there's any questions for Nathan, you can go ahead and do that. We did separate the action item tonight from the presentation, and Superintendent Ernster can also come up to the podium either during this section or the next when we take it for actual consideration. So with Nathan, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you kindly, Dan, and good evening, everybody. I am going to do a quick screen share here. All right, can you confirm that you can see the beginning of this PowerPoint presentation?
We can.
Beautiful. All right. And there we go. So, thank you all and good evening. My name is Nathan Schupels. I am the consulting manager with Wachtel Tree Science. We are based out of the Milwaukee area, hence why I am calling in remotely due to the winter weather. A bit of my background: I'm a registered consulting arborist, ISA certified arborist, tree risk assessment qualified. I've been in the consulting arboriculture industry for approximately 15 years, writing plans, doing inventories, and helping communities like yours to implement proactive urban forest management. This is a fun full circle moment for me. I am a graduate of the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point Urban Forestry program from 2010. So I certainly appreciate the opportunity provided by the city to come back and do this high level look at your urban forest data and do a look back on where was the city's urban forest program in 2010, which is available as a plan on the city's urban forestry website. Looking where were you then, what steps were taken over these last 14 years, and what can you look forward to in the future. This presentation is relatively brief, a very high level summary highlighting some of the key points of the accomplishments and the needs of the city's urban forest moving forward. Very quick background, this project was funded through a 50-50 cost share grant provided by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources. Again, cost sharing between both the state DNR and the city of Stevens Point. Looking at, to accomplish this, we were provided a data set from the city's existing GIS, or Geographic Information System program, of the tree inventory. So your public trees, whether that be street trees and park trees, that have been updated over the past few years by city staff, I believe through the years of roughly 2021, 2022, 2023, and some wrap up in early 2024. From that data and the copy of that data set, we then look back at the plan that was drafted for the city in 2010. Again, we're coming in as an outsider looking in, really to provide a fresh set of eyes on the city's urban forest management. There was another consultant that had worked with the city back in 2010, and it's a really good idea to continue to bring different perspectives, different sets of eyes, to get different opinions on where is the state of things. And my plan, and as I looked at it, really from what I found, is that the city has been taking exceptional steps in the right direction from where you were roughly 14 years ago to today. You know, taking that outside analysis that was provided in 2010 that provided action steps, and then implementing that in your daily forestry, annual forestry, to where you are at, to get the urban forest to where it's at today. So right at the beginning of the report, essentially calling out and complimenting the city on an exceptional job well done. Since 2010, the city has doubled, or roughly doubled, its annual tree planting efforts. Back in 2010, looking at planting roughly 150 trees a year, to now where you're consistently planting anywhere from 250 to 300 trees annually is a great step to promote an expanding urban forest cover throughout the city. Over the last 14 years, city staff, at the direction of that plan that was created, targeted removals to focus on two different tree genera, Acer being maples and Fraxinus being ash, which were the two most or highest represented tree genus and species in the urban forest at that time. Within the industry, we strive for a goal, it's called the 20-10-5 rule, where really of an overall urban forest population, we don't have any more than 20% of those trees within a family. We don't have any more than 10% within a genus, and we don't have any more than 5% of a given species. So back in 2010, the two genera that exceeded those recommendations were maples, which in 2010 made up 33% of the urban forest, which is common. It's very common to see roughly half to 2/3 of our urban forest made up of maples, ash trees, and honey locust trees, which is a remnant of all the American elms that were being removed across the state in the late 70s through and into the 80s. Additionally, we have our ash tree genus, the Fraxinus. Back in 2010, sat at approximately 15% of the overall urban public forest. That currently is down to 7%, and that's an excellent target to be shooting for. Again, if Dutch elm disease and its identification and establishment in Wisconsin in the late 60s taught us anything, we need to peel back or dial back on planting too many of one tree species. Since that time, emerald ash borer became established in the state starting in 2008. So that's what the city was looking at, is possibly losing up to 15% of its urban forest through another very destructive pest that aggressively attacks all of our ash tree species here in Wisconsin. On the backside of those removals, city staff are very key in deciding and pushing for greater species diversity across the public urban forest, to where now within the plan, I do call out this is hands down the most well-organized and diverse urban forest data set that I've had the pleasure to review and provide management recommendations. In 2010, we were roughly, the city had roughly 48 different tree species. That now sits at 99 different tree species. And that's an exceptional job in essentially hedging bets for the future of what sort of pest might be coming or invasive pest might be coming in the future that could threaten particular tree species in our state. Additionally, city staff has implemented an aggressive young tree pruning program to where they've successfully been able to prune up to 2,000 young trees annually. When we talk about young trees, these are trees that have been planted, established over the course of 2 to 3 years, and then starting to aggressively prune these trees to promote a good structure. And a good structure for an urban street tree has an upright form, a strong central leader, and then adequate clearance to both the adjacent street and sidewalks, so these trees aren't becoming a safety hazard. And the city has done a very good job with all the new tree plantings that have been going on to stay on top of managing those trees and training them for better structure in the future. If we can train these trees now to have better structure, the goal or the benefit that we see is reduced tree failures in extreme storm events, whether that's heavy snow and ice loading or very strong summer storms that rip through. If we can promote adequate branch spacing and reducing poor structure that we call codominant stems, the trees have a better chance of withstanding these severe storm events without failure. And the city's done a great job in that. And then finally, city has been successful in adding another ISA certified arborist to its forestry staff. This is a credentialing program that's provided by the International Society of Arboriculture. It's a demonstration of a professional to both education and field experience, implementing industry best management practices in the field, again, to promote better tree diversity, better tree structure, safer tree operations. And the city has been hitting all of those marks in the last 14 years. My big takeaway out of all of this is that the city should be commended on a job well done. If we look at total numbers and valuation of the urban forest as it stands, the city's urban forest is valued at roughly $7.6 to $7.7 million. It's very important that when we look at city forestry operations and a city's urban forest, it's a growing asset within a community. It's one of the few assets that we can point to that grow and appreciate in time instead of having to calculate depreciation over time. This value is up from approximately $4.9 million in 2010. That would make sense. As trees grow and more trees are planted, we have greater economic value in a larger urban forest. Average value trunk per trunk diameter inch, because this was a figure I could point to back in 2010. The current valuation is roughly $138 per trunk diameter inch, up from $87 in 2010. If we do a look back on inflation rates over that 14-year period, this number tracks to a similar value from 2010, i.e. $87 back then is roughly valued at $125 today. So roughly the same value, slightly increased, better diversity, better tree structure, better tree health. If we break that down on an individual value per tree, we're looking at roughly $1,000 per tree throughout the city's urban forest. And these are this is an estimation of value, but it's an exercise to demonstrate that trees do have value. So as trees are lost, the city is experiencing a loss in its asset and a loss in the value across the city. And we need to be very cognizant of that as we move in the future, as trees are lost or trees are damaged. Those trees have value, and it does justify budgets to manage them consistently. If we look at ecosystem services, The three big hitters that we focus on are air quality improvements, carbon sequestration, and stormwater management. And the city's urban forest is providing a lot back to its residents and visitors on a daily and annual basis. Running what we call, or using a program called iTree Eco, which is a analysis software program that's been developed by the United States Forest Service and various partners, we can say that the city's urban forest removes roughly 1,500 pounds of air pollutants every year, valued at roughly $4.3 thousand every year. Carbon sequestration, these trees are holding carbon, roughly 33.7 tons of carbon, which to manage that would be valued at roughly $5.7 to $5.8 thousand. Stormwater mitigation alone, roughly 361,000 gallons of water that your urban trees are working to address. It's reducing stormwater runoff, it's intercepting rainfall, it's helping to hold that moisture. And if we look at evaluation, we can look at that as roughly $3,000 annually. We utilized updated data sets, aerial imaging that was provided by the state DNR in late 2024 to do a big picture look at where is the urban forest canopy within the city of Stevens Point, and what does that look like compared against the overall footprint of the city? Within Stevens Point, we're looking at trees making up approximately 48 to 50% of all your land area. If we have a metric that we point to, municipalities or a benchmark that we should be looking at, they should be planning for 30 to 40%. So using this data, we can look and say that the city's forestry operations are moving forward in the right direction, promoting an adequate amount or exceeding the benchmarks that we look at for urban forest cover throughout the state. Looking towards the future, the action plan and the funding sources, that was a specific request by the city staff and its alderpersons to look into these new initiatives or thinking outside of the box. We mentioned that trees, our urban trees, play such a huge role in stormwater management for a community that has very real dollars. We can say that the city's and its water utility is already stepping up to fund some of the tree planting within the city. That's recently been increased to $30,000, up from $25,000. My challenge to the city is to look to other cities throughout Wisconsin that are setting an example, such as Racine and Green Bay, that fund almost all of their forestry operations through a stormwater revenues. The current forestry budget on an annual basis sits at roughly $370,000. This is to highlight that there could be a significant increase or a change in how you look at stormwater revenues and how you can put that back into public resources such as trees that give back to all of your residents and all of your visitors on a daily and annual basis. A relatively new initiative is to look at forest carbon credits. Big picture carbon credit exchange, we're looking at preserving undeveloped forest land and putting those tracts of land into untouched management or managing for the best forest health that we can to provide the best ecosystem services that we can. And then there are industries across the world that can buy into this program to say, if they're falling behind in their services that they provide and how it impacts our environment, they can buy these carbon credits to offset some of their footprints in the short term while they make the needed improvements. Think of our industrial practices and a lot of the bad things that gives back to the environment. On the municipal scale and municipal urban forestry, this is an emerging and relatively new market. My discussions at this time between DNR, federal, so state staff, federal staff, and colleagues in the private industry is that we do feel there's a lot of unanswered questions. There's a couple of communities that are starting this and that are looking into this more in depth. And I think in time, they're going to be able to answer these questions that we have, specifically in their valuation techniques, and frankly, some ethical questions of if a carbon credit program is to offset or set aside land that's not supposed to be developed, our city forestry operations are planting trees no matter what. Where do we put a value on the ecosystem services that are provided there to offset industries that aren't catching up? My recommendation to the city right now is to continue to monitor, to look to the communities that are implementing these forest carbon credits for municipal programs and to see what the future will hold. I would say it's not there just yet, but I do anticipate that in the coming years, we're going to gain a lot of additional knowledge on what that could look like and what options would be available to the city. Additionally, we recommend in regards to ash and elm tree treatments. We've been dealing with ash management for the past 15 years in light of EAB. The city still has some room that they can continue to remove approximately another 350 to 400 undesirable ash trees to get the overall ash component to roughly 5% of your tree population. But then with that being said, treating trees that may have a bleak future, whether that be ash trees and emerald ash borer or elm trees, American elms and Dutch elm disease, it has merit. These are established trees that are providing significant benefit back to the community, that those benefits are immediately lost. There's plenty of research that's out there to justify the monies that go into these treatment programs are far outweighed by the benefits that are provided back. So it is an expense, but it should be considered as an investment in your city's urban forest future. So with that, I'd like to open this to questions while we have time.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the Board of Commissioners? Comments? Okay.
All right, Nathan, so the next item will be when we actually take action here, the committee considers it. So if you just want to stand by as we go through that part.
Yes.
All right. Item number 4, the adoption of the Stevens Point Forestry Department Management Plan. Forester Ernster.
I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say.
I can help. So essentially, obviously you heard kind of the highlights of this. The plan is in much greater detail if you dig into the charts, read through the literature. I think it can't be underscored though that I'm not knocking any other community, but our forestry department, especially with the resources we have, Todd's leadership, Paul, who was with him for a great number of years before he's been promoted to the park side of things, as well as Jacob, who's in it now, Jonathan, Ken. We are basically a municipal leader in this, and that really is credit to that whole group of folks. Todd won't necessarily sing that praise, but I'll sing his praises and just say that there's a tremendous amount of good that goes on, and a lot of our plans, because we do them a little earlier, get used in some capacities for other communities. So if you do have the time, I'd encourage you to read through it. If not, though, just know that there's been a lot of good that's happened since 2010, but that trajectory started even long before that as we've gone through that. And certainly this Park Commission's endorsed a lot of different efforts, going back to even when we proactively got money from the council for the ash selective removals and getting ahead of some of the EAB items that you're first probably reading and seeing in the news for other communities now. Todd and his team was years ahead of that. So kudos to his crew, and certainly we recommend approval from the commission tonight.
I was real happy with the plan that Wachtel put together. It was a thorough examination. We waited till, like I said, I think when I was here before, it was supposed to be done last year, but we had some glitches with the software, and I didn't have a chance to update all the new tree species, the new diameters, and it didn't make sense to do a plan that didn't have accurate data, whether it's on the tree species or the size of the trees or the conditions of the trees. So that's why we kind of waited, so we had accurate information.
All right, thanks, Don.
I have a question. How often are you collecting that data that would go into a report like this? Is that every other year, every 3 years, or is that an ongoing process that you and your staff take care of just to make sure it's current?
What my plan is here, now that I finally have the GIS system up, is that I want to try to inventory where we go and remeasure each tree a third of the city at a time. So after 4 years, it'll constantly that way in case something gets missed where a tree got ran over that I don't know about or whatever the wrong tree size is in there, I can check that. So that's what my plan is.
All right, thanks. Any other questions, comments? Go ahead.
I was just going to make a motion to approve the plan.
Okay. Also motion and second? Yes. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan, appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you all very much. Hope you have a nice evening.
Hey, can you end sharing your screen? I need that part back from you.
Sorry about that.
You're okay.
I thought I did end it.
Hold on, it might be on my end then. Disregard.
Double checking. You good?
Yeah, we should be right. All right.
All right, ready to go? All right, item number 5, award of the 2025-26 Emerald Ash Borer Treatment Contract. In our packet, we've received 2 bids from True Green and First Choice Tree Care of $22,100 from True Green, $29,410 from First Choice. Staff is recommending $22,100. Any questions or comments regarding this? Otherwise, looking for a motion for approval.
Yeah, I'd move to accept the True Green.
Correct.
I'll second that.
All right. Dean, any questions, comments? Otherwise, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, item number 6, again, as said earlier, Director Kramer will discuss the master plan, and then we'll come back to the committee, and then we'll open it up to anybody that would like to have brief comments, limited at 3 minutes at that point. Again, this committee is not making any decision. This is just preliminary tonight, so we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So obviously, we have quite a few people here tonight, which we're thrilled about, to go over kind of how we got to where we are, where we're at in the process. Per commission, I'm going to go over a little bit of the information that you're mostly aware of because we've been working on this for a little over a year, but just to make sure those in the audience, those that might watch the recording after this, in between the next few months of this process, kind of knows how we got to this point, and we also have that on record. So essentially, how we started this process actually goes back to 2022. So for those of you in the crowd that might not know, the city's municipal park, rec, and forestry departments are required to do a comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. Ultimately, you want that to be on record and updated within a 5-year window to be eligible for grants, as well as to continually kind of take the temperature of the community that you're serving and seeing what is kind of the roadmap of what goes forward in public improvements. We have several of these plans on file going through the last 40 years plus, but the most recent one that was kind of that we have on file right now that we're working through is 2022's process. So we did community input meetings at that point, as well as a community survey, and then in April of 2023, this body, as well as the Common Council, adopted that plan. When that plan was coming to kind of the finish line, there was basically information that was shared with our mayor's office from FEMA, stating that there was some funds available potentially through a BRIC grant that could leading to try to build a police department garage that would also and could double with the forestry department, because obviously when there's large storms in the city, the forestry division helps with some of the tree removals and some of that critical infrastructure to help keep road networks open. And the idea that came together with the finance committee as well as staff at that time was to try and fund a garage of that magnitude. That grant opportunity looked like a good option. So the city authorized back in March of 2023, moving forward with trying to acquire that grant. And that's where, as the corp was getting adopted, the first rendering of showing a garage attached to this building began. When that came up, it alerted, because it was publicly discussed, the Boys and Girls Club, who was in Goerke Park, the executive director at the time, to reach out and state if that was going to open on that side of the park, that they were interested in seeing what the land would happen around that area where the current community gymnasium is and the Park, Rec, and Forestry office. That was only one of multiple requests we've had related. We've had pickleball come and ask. We've had ask about building more ball diamonds through the years. And it really led to a discussion of, well, if something's going to be expanded here other than this garage, the master plan is long overdue. Additionally, within the comprehensive outdoor rec plan, there is several parks that are identified that we should be doing master plans as a commission and as a community. The reason that Goerke went first was really related to the garage effort. The Boys and Girls Clubs expressed interest, some parking challenges we were having related to school drop-off, and then knowing that our pool was starting to have maintenance issues. So our pool's a little over 70 years old. We're in the midst of doing a repair on some of the gutter work in that pool. So everything really pointed us to land where we went next, which was in June of '24, this body authorized hiring Rattler Corporation to complete the Goerke Park Master Plan. We are only planning at this point, so that the effort we've gone through since basically that time and starting in June is the roadmap, and it will be a plan that'll be used. So as the stars align with fundraising, as opportunities come available for different grants and other opportunities, if and when money's available, we know where things fit in the future. So in June of '24, when that contract was authorized, Zenoff Park was put forward at the same time. The reason for that is that when the turf was done in Zenoff Park, there's been an increase in youth athletics that have been playing out at Zenoff Park. And we've had both our youth baseball and our youth softball expressed interest in a complex and trying to be more at that footprint. And we've also been approached and talked about a domed or an enclosed structure in Goerke numerous times. And if that concept continues to be part of this discussion, there really isn't a path forward that the youth softball organization would have to go to another location once we get into outdoor sports. So Zenoff Park was the practical approach of where that could potentially go. Lots of agreements would have to follow that. So ultimately, we embarked on this process of saying, let's look at both community parks, see how these pieces can fit together. In 2024, in June, we talked about a lengthy process just to start. So first and foremost, to try to figure out how the puzzle comes together, we started by saying, let's have some preliminary discussions with what we call kind of the largest user groups. The school district, the public school district is really one of them, and the Boys and Girls Club is certainly the other. And based on some of the conversations we were having when we talked about the garage, that's where we began. Some of that feedback then led to the November of 2024 discussion with the Park Commission, in which we talked big bubble drawings, very basic. You can load that if you'd like to on our website, about we'd like to build a bigger pool aquatic center if we do a remodel. At the time, the conversation was it could stay in the spot it's in, or it could be looked at being moved if there's an opportunity for some sort of efficiencies, which is why some of these things have been moved in this current rendition. Additionally, there was quite a bit of discussion and feedback from the group that attended that night saying, will some sort of Price Street entrance be added? And the direction that night was to look at three options, which the current drawing I'll show shows two of them. Option one, if one gets created, could go across the property that the city currently owns. Option two, if a grid network was really important from our planning side of things with our permitting office, as well as from the park standpoint, you'll see it would require ultimately the acquisition of two more homes if and when they ever become available. So that's on the drawing. And a third option is to take them both off. And that's another thing that's going to be part of this plan. So ultimately, in November of 2024, staff was authorized by the Park Commission to include the Boys and Girls Club, look at that Price Street side, and look about moving some things around. Since that time, we've had meetings with all of the user groups inside of Goerke Park, and I'll show some more details on that here in the next slide. The plan from that was to get that user group feedback and come to this meeting, which was the next step in the process, to say to the Park Commission, is this capturing what we talked about back in November of '24? Because the biggest missing piece here yet, which is next in the plan, is to get the community as a whole to say, what do you need, what do you want, what do we move around? And that was our plan from the get-go to come about this, certainly wanting to listen the whole way about it and try to be as transparent as we can. So tonight's discussion will be reviewing those drawings, getting some commission feedback. Certainly we want to hear anybody that has things to say, but our intention is the March public information meetings as well as online submittals will allow everyone to put their comments in writing, attend the meetings, and also put their comments in writing so they can be cataloged and brought back to the Park Commission for their third review, which will likely happen in April or May. Our goal all along when we started was to try to adopt this prior to budgeting as we start looking at our 5-year capital budgets at the end of summer and into fall. So we're using a June or July adoption as our best guess. One of the questions I get often is, well, who did this? How does it work? I can tell you that we've had a little over 34 documented meetings on these plans, dating back to when we first started looking at it in March of '23. Most of them have started in '24 and beyond. There's been 70+ individuals from all the different agencies and organizations that have participated. This is the dates and the names that are included in them. We estimate between those 70+ individuals, if you start talking about presidents going back to their boards, them getting some feedback from that, school district with their leaderships, there's over 1,000 hours into this from a user group standpoint. If you look at the names, I know it's hard to read up here, but it includes Boys and Girls Club, the Stevens Point Police Department, the Moose Lodge for Elements with Zenoff, Spash Athletics, Spash Administration, Pacelli's president and their administration, obviously Rattler Corporation, the SPSA. We have the the YMCA, we have youth football, we have Pacelli Athletics, and then we also got into things like Ultimate Frisbee and some of those groups. So ultimately, this is kind of how we got to what the user groups are telling us they were looking to acquire. And again, these are the dates and the people that were attending those meetings. With that said, the part that I think everyone wants to know is, what are we actually staring at? There's a lot here, right? So what I'm going to do is just kind of walk you through the elements that have been discussed in all of these meetings and how they look today. And then we'll quick look at Zenoff, and then ultimately I'm happy to answer any questions and certainly kind of take the next step here as we go tonight. So in Goerke Park, as I mentioned, the first thing, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see my cursor, but what really kicked this all off is this garage facility that is planned to be attached to the police department. This garage facility within the FEMA grant that we applied for and were unsuccessful is a facility that would house all of the squads and police equipment, as well as the forestry wing, which in our current building, if you were standing on the south side, goes on a southeast orientation out towards the existing ball diamonds. This garage is large enough to put the forestry equipment in it, and then it would double to be a storm shelter for this whole corridor of the city. So when large events are going on, but even when events aren't, if we were awarded that grant, the police department would be tasked with opening the doors to let people come in during storm events. We do plan to reapply for that in 2025. We're just waiting some of the federal government to sort itself out here before we can do that application. If that facility is constructed, the grant also involved moving the Park Rec and Forestry office into 19, which is just through the walls here behind me. That would allow basically the city offices in the park to be in one campus. We do not intend ever to move the Park Rec and Forestry and the forestry wing out of Goerke Park, because the personnel that are here maintain the park. So regardless if we did move it somewhere else or talk about that, we're going to be trucking all those people right back in here because it's such a busy location. So we were ultimately looking at this as a consolidation of buildings. With that said, we can function the Park Rec and Forestry out of the building we have today. Again, we're looking to collaborate with the PD, and we're trying to make something work for our community, but we do have opportunities if something like that did come to fruition. With that said, when this piece came together is when the discussions about could the Boys and Girls Club someday do something. I do need to mention that the Boys and Girls Club and City collaborated on this area all the way back when the initial building was constructed. The current agreement on file is that they have first right of refusal to that space. They've been a great neighbor for the city, and we've tried to work through lots of different things in the park. So it was kind of it fell into what was talked about going back 14 years ago. This footprint plan that's shown is just a bare bones kind of theory of what it could be. The idea there is potentially it could be a couple community gymnasiums that could be used by their entity if they chose to build something. It could be other things too. And obviously I don't speak on behalf of the Boys and Girls Club, but we have met with them numerous times, and ultimately it would be their decision in the long run, but we're trying to basically make the space work just due to the pure volume of the tremendous great work that they do with the youth. So as we moved from that piece, we started talking to the school district saying, okay, as we're looking at your Phy-Ed classes, your youth, your athletics after school, how does this work? And the police department was actually just had been engaged about the drop-off on Michigan Avenue. If anyone's been here through it between a 7 o'clock or a 3 o'clock window, really the hour before and the half hour after those, this is really starting to stack up on the roadway in both directions, and it's caused a lot of problems for a number of years. What that led to is what is the best options that are the safest that can also work for schools and traffic. We went through a number of looks at this, but I'll show you where it landed. What's shown here is that if a parking lot is constructed along Main Street, it would serve as the staff parking lot during the school day or any school functions. In theory, again, not speaking for the school district, this is conceptual, but ultimately if the staff was able to park along Main Street, it would open up the ability for 21 to be empty for parents in the mornings and the afternoons, or visitors to the school or the Boys and Girls Club to use lot 21. Additionally, there is quite a few folks that do come early at, say, 1:30 in the afternoons. They park and read a book. That lot would have quite a bit of openings for people to park there versus in the drop-off lane. This lot shows that parents or people dropping children off could enter Sims Avenue, and this is a drop-off lane surrounding that lot in which cars would then exit back to the left and not intersect with buses going back to Michigan. We met with the Director of Transportation for the school district. They have a couple options if this layout lays like this. buses could come in on Sims, and this is what we are calling a bus lane. So it'd be a maintenance or bus lane, essentially. We'd have to plow snow if a structure ever went next to it. So the buses can actually turn south. They'd be able to discharge or load the bus to the right, which stops children from having to cross the front of the bus. And then they could enter P.J. Jacobs and not basically cross paths with students. The other thing that the school district would have an opportunity to do is Sims Avenue today comes through in a gravel format. This has shown that it could be considered for asphalt. With the same idea in mind, there'd be gates. The school could open it, so buses could also come off of Minnesota if they wanted to and head south. Your buses that would then discharge onto Main Street with the parents discharging onto Michigan. Call it the zipper effect. You're going two different directions trying to stop some of that stacking in traffic. The next question that was logical to come up that said, well, how can you park all of these things at the same time? From a use standpoint, the aquatic center, if it would get moved up into this location, and I'll explain how it landed there next, is only open approximately 10 to 12 weeks of the year when the school is not in session. So any parking that the teachers would be using this location would not conflict with the pool. Additionally, a domed structure, or even if there wasn't a dome on it, would not be operating in a commercial operation, a rental operation, or a tournament operation during the day. The school simply has to have that space to be able to run Phi-Ed programs, have overflow from lunch, and all the type of activities that they do. I don't know the exact particulars, but that space is critical to them. So when we met with the school district, we ultimately ended up talking about that this space is certainly needed not only for practices, but for their school day operations for the things that they do. So again, when the large car or traffic volume would be coming, the school would not be in session. However, there would be some overlap in the evenings should there be, say, a volleyball game, a school activity, or other things going on in the school. This lot also, as everyone knows, serves as overflow for the football stadium whenever there's not snow on the ground, essentially. But the way it's drawn up here today is that there is about 225 spaces that go across that spot that there is room for. Shot put and discus does exist here today in this corner, on the southeast corner. That is currently shown to move to the central green space because discus is done across, there's a concrete area that they're actually throwing off of, but then it goes out into a painted green space that wouldn't affect the fall football or overflow into the central green space. Shot put does have a surface that you wouldn't necessarily be playing a grass sport on, but it's a much smaller and fits off the edge. But this would be moving all track and field events up into a corridor basically immediately adjacent to track that they currently do head out the southeast corner on today. Back to the aquatic center. Our current pool, you have to have changing facilities. So we have a building there right now that has a toilet. It has obviously the locker rooms, and then after we start it up, we winterize it and it sits vacant the rest of the year. The idea of this moving up next to whether a dome is built, the idea in this drawing is showing that it could be some sort of enclosed winter space or 12-month space. Building 12 is situated in a way that it would serve both facilities. So in concept, again, not designed, you need an interlock to enter a building, an air chamber, to get into a building of that magnitude that has an overhead dome, essentially. In addition, that basically means you have a building that's attached with a tunnel. If Building 12 is structured in a way that the peak of the pool aquatic center is going to be in the low peak of an indoor dome center. Obviously, the winter, cold weather months is when they peak. Our pool will be closed. When the pool is in the hottest times of the year, it can get stuffy in a dome as well in terms of heat, depending upon how the climate control goes. And most sports want to be outside whenever they can be. It still needs to be used 12 months of the year to ever be financially sustainable, and we believe there will be usage for it. But that's the idea, is building 12 rather than being a single season building, it could be a 4-season building, and you would share spaces like locker rooms, concessions, and the things of that nature. As you move further in the plan, Goerke Park never had a playground. So one of the things that comes up often in our community park from neighboring residents as well as folks that are coming in for the numerous uses here is, can a playground be placed in this location? The way the tennis courts today lay out east to west work, they're the varsity tennis program for Pacelli, and they certainly could stay there. The thing that would conflict if this layout direction continues to go this way is that in order to get a practice football sized facility, lawn, park space in this area, as well as be able to flood an ice rink in the winter. We wanted as big a green space in the center as possible. The one that's depicted here is approximately, I want to make sure I give the right dimension here, 120 feet by 330 feet. So it is not a high school, it's short about 20 feet, regulation NHFS field, but it's large enough for our youth football practices and things of that nature, and still for a very large ice rink to go in. Not a hockey rink. What's shown here currently is that a boarded hockey rink is not included. Preliminary conversations with the user groups that are, obviously we don't have a youth hockey outdoor rink club that we've met with, but the others was exploring an opportunity to place hockey in another location. And that's obviously something that's going to have to be discussed here and discussed as we go forward too, but that would be a lit area that would serve for the lit ice rink. The tennis courts would stay as 6 because they are used by PJs for their Phi Ed program, and they are the varsity Pacelli's varsity program tennis court location. And the basketball court does see enough usage that we believed that being up in the front was important as well. Other things that have been brought up to the attention of the city through the years is that the path on the north end of the park goes nowhere. Today it just dead ends essentially at the top northeast corner of the parking lot. So as we talked about being able to traverse the park or walk in foot traffic or bicycle traffic, how this concept is shown now is that when you got to that current dead end, there would be a crosswalk across the parking lot if it was constructed. You could actually walk a sidewalk that would go all the way down to basically another set of intersections. Today, you have to walk this parking lot and interact with cars unless you hug a sidewalk up by the Boys and Girls Club entrance. The drawing shows that there'd be a pedestrian path that would go down to the intersection of Sims and what I'm going to call the school bus lane. There you could cross to head west to Michigan on a sidewalk in front of, if an expansion would happen, by the Boys and Girls and Club, or you could head south across and walk alongside a turfed field, the 2 existing grass fields, or a dome structure, whatever ends up landing on this drawing. When you got down to the south end of that area, you could walk east on the sidewalk to make a loop and actually walk the sidewalk all the way back up to the Willett entrance or back towards that path if you'd like to, and walk a circle, or you certainly could just cross over and walk the existing sidewalks on Main Street. So obviously, pathway being able to go every direction in the park would be excellent, but having that fixture of the football field and the turf where it is, there's no way really to get around that cleanly. And then, but we're trying to address that if you wanted to get across and throughout the park, you wouldn't have to interact with cars when you're on feet or on foot. Aside from that, then, as you look at another big component of this drawing is the driveways. So the parking lot idea predates, I think it goes back as early as 2006 that this concept was once before discussed. Since then, obviously, with a lot of the improvements to the Goerke KB Willett Arena, and with the Pointer men, Pointer women, the varsity program and the JV program from the high school, we have more people in the Willett Arena than there ever has been. So the way this lot was drawn in was based on the PD's request of getting the access to Price Street. And right now, the only home that's owned by the city is the one that the first driveway is depicted. And the lot was just laid out based on those conversations that had happened back then, as well as conversations about if the tennis court moves to the north, you also have this green space. You ultimately have more area, another 100 stalls that could serve kind of central part of the park, the Willett's main entrance on the west, and take some of the pressure that's out on the street today and move it inside the park. What the second driveway shows to the Park Commission off your direction is that it would require 2 houses to be acquired. And there's no way to know if that could ever happen, right? Essentially, they could never be sold, and that wouldn't be possible. But that would be what it would look like if the goal of this plan in the end is to say if and when someday possibly there could be a grid system, that's when a driveway could be built. That's what you'd be looking at, is approximately this location. Otherwise, there is obviously one home that's acquired here. And I'll keep in mind a third option that was discussed by this board was to do neither, right, to take it off. I would also throw out that there is nothing that would prohibit saying a fourth option if you were to slide down the block further. And the same thing would be true as what the second option is. That driveway would only ever be possible if and when, and maybe never, but if a house was to be acquired someday by the city. Aside from that, I should also mention, today, the Parker building sits down here, which was originally the athletic, basically the athletic building, right? It was the locker rooms for the football field when the first football games were played here in 1934. That building today is used not rented. It's basically given over. We have a Northward is the contractor that is in that building, and they do rent some skates. They sell hot chocolate, and the bathroom is open when they're open in a pretty limited capacity, just due to they haven't really seen any financial gain on Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Obviously, the weekends are heavier. They've had some staffing challenges. The current tenant or person that uses that building bought the business from a tenant before, and it's changed through the years. So essentially, after that is done or closed, and that can range some years from, say, 20 days being open to some years being open 4 or 5 days on a year like last year. Certainly things have been a little abnormal with the winter in the past. It's used in the basement for storage only for some youth. The upstairs has basically been sitting vacant for a great number of years, especially since the Willet was built in 1980, and then as locker rooms and improvements have been done. But certainly the building has stood there for a long time, and this plan would mean it would either need to be moved or it would have to be demoed in a way where things could be saved, or one of those combinations thereof. All of this, as you can imagine, as you look at it, is aspirational, right? There is a lot of componentry to this. A lot of it could happen in a long time from now. A lot of it may never happen. But what this shows is basically all of the users saying, hey, this would work for me, this wouldn't work for me, this is how it could be, and that's how we kind of landed in this location. The Aquatic Center, I will mention, in terms of the 50,000 square feet, it is not designed here. It's just kind of a placeholder. The design would have to come with an aquatic specialist to talk about the slides, talk about the splash pad features, what the lane and swimming pool would look like, things of that nature. Same thing on the dome. What's shown as a super field under the dome. What super field essentially means is that it's a turfed facility. You could have a full-size soccer field, lacrosse field underneath it, and it's also large enough in this footprint that you'd have 2 softball diamonds that could be inside of that. The reason softball is not ideal there to be all the time is the height restriction. If you hit a pop fly or something high, you can interact with the roof, obviously, and that's not ideal, especially in competitive sports. So, meeting with the youth softball group, youth baseball group, our community has been chomping for an enclosed winter space or cold weather space. They were all jazzed about it, knowing, though, that it would require some relocation of other amenities if that was to happen. I also will just mention that the Convention and Visitors Bureau, I am a member of their board. They've been working through a strategic plan as of late. That enclosed winter recreation space was the #1 item that they also received. So whether it goes here or not is certainly a big discussion and question that's got to be answered over the next several months. But the community has certainly been longing to try to find a location for something like this. We'll come back to this after we go through the next 2. I just want to mention Zenoff here real quickly before we open it up. On the Zenoff Park part.
Quick question. Can you talk briefly about the high school's use of the dome? You didn't really touch about the high school's comments as to what they would use in the school year.
We'll come back. The Zenoff Park land with acquisition. So in terms of Zenoff Park itself, we only own the 3 diamonds that's there, and we own the parking lot. And then the Moose Lodge owns the parcel that basically is sandwiched in between. If you recall in November when we were looking at this drawing, at the time we were in conversations about could some land be acquired, would it work out? While there's still some communications on that front, it's not developed in the format that we had originally saw. So from a planning standpoint, where we have pivoted is ultimately to come up with 2 options for this park. The first option is something that the city controls entirely, and that would be potentially improvements to what we have already. So if land was not acquired, there's long been talk of acquisition, or I should say collaboration, with the high school and the college should they want to play softball activities here. They currently play at this facility until April 15th. Then when Plover opens up, they relocate to Plover. And then additionally, we have more and more youth that are out here when there's room, when the adult softball is not occupying all 3 fields. So what you see in this first drawing or first concept without land acquisition is that should we have a big push from our collaborators, and if contracts would line up where it was favorable for the city and the user groups, if the center diamond was to be improved to be a turf field with a movable permanent fence, it could work for adult softball, it could work for the high schools, it could work for the college, and ultimately it could still take care of our youth as well. And it could be improved along with improvements we've already got planned in our budgeting, which is a hardscape improvement around the ball diamonds and LED light upgrades. The lights out here are dated. They're going to be expensive to replace, and it's already on a horizon. The other thing that is going to need to be done here long-term is the parking lot. It's coming due for a resurfacing. So again, if no land is acquired, what will make sense is for us to resurface the parking lot we have. If more collaboration took place, certainly the other 2 diamonds could be resurfaced too, but based on current demand and where things sit, that would be if and when only when funding allowed or opportunities presented themselves. The next concept that is in the packet is land acquisition. So should something come to be with an agreement with the Moose Lodge, or if a property is sold someday or something else changes, this is the concept that was shown and discussed as we talked about kind of the corner of their lot property as opportunity if that happens. Really everything from drawing 1 applies, except you wouldn't necessarily have to upgrade one of the existing diamonds right away. Certainly long-term, all the diamonds being new and upgraded is ideal, but that all, depends on business models and financing and capital campaigns and all of that. But if one field could be constructed, it would allow those other user groups to be here and still work alongside what we have and be going towards what people have talked about for many years in our community, which is a bigger complex for softball and baseball. Both of these concepts, I have to say this, SPSA has run this complex since the day it was built, and our goal has always been along the line to protect our adult softball program that's been here and built the complex. So in all these situations, if a dome is built in Goerke or not, if we have to move things with our youth, we would need to do that where we could structure agreements where there's some great collaboration, whether that be one organization or some sort of co-op within those organizations. And I want you to know there's a lot of negotiations that have to happen within that. But we've been talking with all those user groups as we've gone through that. And I do want to tell you that everybody that's reviewed the plan so far from a user group standpoint has overwhelmingly said, we really think there's a lot of good in these plans. And we've told all of them, please submit your changes. And we've not received any from them. But all of them have been informed we need to get community feedback, and there has to certainly be changes to accommodate those things. So that's a long-winded way of saying where we got to here today. I'm happy to take questions from the board, and certainly I can answer what I can for the public. And a reminder, the goals for tonight, we met with all those folks with our user group standpoint. We certainly have their endorsements in terms of the latest renderings, knowing that changes are coming. What I'm looking for from the Park Commission ultimately tonight and staff needs is there something in these plans that you say we need to change that now before we go and get the public feedback, or is it in a state where we have enough to gain the public feedback at this point? After that, I'm also looking to seek guidance to make sure you're all confident and okay with me holding the public information meetings. What that likely looks like is mailers going out to the neighbors of the park, press releases going out to the community as a whole saying come visit. Those that can come in person to the rec center would be allowed to see it. I'd give a similar presentation as what this is tonight. They would then be able to write their comments in writing so they can be cataloged, and those who couldn't attend those meetings would be able to submit a form from online. Then all that information, which will likely be lengthy, will come back to this board to allow us to make further changes. So with that, I can turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, any comments or questions from the board? Yes.
One thing I had mentioned to Dan earlier today was that the Parker building has been there for a long time, and it's kind of a significant building for people in the community, I think. And I do believe it is a WPA era building. So I was thinking that this plan really doesn't allow for that building to remain where it is, but I'd just like to make the point that we should be thinking about the Parker building early on in this process and look at perhaps relocating it. I'm not sure where we'd relocate it to, but I think that should be an option we'd really consider for that. The other thing is the outdoor ice rink, and that's been there for a long, long time. And there is no place for people that just want to have pickup hockey games to go and play a pickup hockey game. And I would imagine that there's probably university students and high school students in the area, even younger kids. Anytime I drive by there, I usually see, especially on the weekends or evenings, that there's people out on the hockey rink playing hockey. So I would like for us to be keeping that in the forefront when we look at what we're doing in the park here and what we could do with that hockey rink, if that stays or goes someplace else.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Well, I just question, Liz, do you feel that it's used by neighbors or just the general population for hockey?
I think probably general population.
Because, then you could move it somewhere where wouldn't it be a real inconvenience?
That's my thought on it. I mean, my son is 50, and he used to play there when he was 10, 12, 15 years old. And I know adults play there as well. I would think it would be used by university students, but I don't know that. That's just a supposition, because a lot of people play hockey coming up through high school and stuff, and they don't go on beyond that. So I think there's probably, but we'd have to find out if there's young people that play it from elsewhere in the community.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions from the board, comments? Okay, so we'll open it up to the community at this time. If you'd, up there, please mention your name, your address, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Don't start yet.
Okay, we're ready.
My name is Mike Disher, 2616 Price Street. My question is kind of twofold. If your plan for Goerke Park would go through, ultimately you're talking about eliminating 2 ball diamonds, correct? And you almost have to rebuild another 2. 1 won't do, because with the size of tournaments that are coming into Stevens Point now, we estimate that, you know, and we're working with Plover, we can't lose a diamond. We have to gain diamonds. I mean, we're talking about JO tournaments between Point and Plover that are going to be 180 teams. And that's a big deal for our hotels. And if we take 1 diamond away, even if it's 10 years down the road, and only rebuild 1, we've in effect lost the field. And we've narrowed our spaces for holding big tournaments. As some of you know, I've been involved in the national tournament scene for a long time. And places that bid on national championships and get those tournaments have at least 6 fields to play on. Otherwise, you just don't have enough places to play. So somewhere, the dome idea is a great idea. However, I don't know that the groups that you talked to, you said we're going to take those 2 fields away. Where are you going to play? And the other thing to remember is that there are studies being done now that show adult softball in the last year has increased participation across the country by up to 12%. So while we're at a low amount of adult softball players where we are now compared to 15 years ago, what do you do if you've taken away a couple of diamonds? And now adult softball is back up to 85 teams, and we say, according to our contract, we get priority scheduling here. Where do the other people go play? So don't lose diamonds. That's just my point. Don't replace 1 diamond with 2 that you're losing.
Thanks. Thank you. Anybody else?
I'll read and go as fast as possible. Well said, Mike. My name is Trina Dorn. I live at 2725 Main Street. I'm coming to speak with all of you tonight as a mother, a grandmother, a taxpayer for 28 years. I've lived in this district, and after talking to hundreds of constituents, knocking on 82 doors, city officials, this city is extremely constrained in how it spends its money due to the need to reallocate the city hall. The ambitious plans to revamp Goerke Park at this point is not affordable. I worry how this will be funded. I've heard there's going to be big donations thrown at that dome, and how we as a city will keep it all running smoothly with the city already struggling on the taxpayers. I do agree that this is absolutely needed, all of this stuff, knowing our pool is in dire straits, which has been for years, and needs to be replaced. An aquatic center would be amazing to add to our city and is much needed. I agree with all of this, and a dome. I would like to address how we lost, this is sad, a city resident, which I found out at a parking meeting with Guthrie and the city and the Stevens Point PD. She died because the ambulance last fall did not make it there. This cannot happen one more time. They couldn't make it. When we have a football game or at the Willett, we are already now way over the current parking and have foot traffic in this area. So dealing with the overflow for not only a football game that fills our grassy field, but now going to be adding possible 4, if not 5 huge events taking place all at once. I did the math. It's going to happen. I am concerned about the parking, the traffic. After going to these meetings and regarding parking put on the police department, planning, our local alderperson is swamped with where we're parking and dealing with issues issues every day. So much concern has been brought up just because of the football games and the KB Willett. Please, let's not add a year-round dome at the junior high school event with an aquatic center, a football game, the Willett Arena, possible meetings at the PD department, conferences. I mean, it's going to overlap, like you had stated already. The overlap and the multiple scenarios I've been being told by constituents is over. I could go on. It is scary how we are all going to be going through all of this. As a community, we are struggling right now trying to figure out now already how we're going to pull this off. As PJ should be number one concern, I agree. Parking, safety, students, parents, staffing should not be parking far away and walking now to the building. I've heard of the bus and all the other plans as well. Instead of placing a dome and removing the field that maybe in time, put the parking spot over there, put the aquatic center back where it started. I agree with all of this parking needed. Teachers deserve close parking. Please consider moving one. I'm trying to chop this up. Please consider moving one or more of these to another location to make the room to what is needed right now, safety and parking. I am asking to please save our hockey rink, our ice skating rink that has been a staple in the city for over 60 years, including the building. I skated here as a little girl with my dad. I built my house there for that reason, and all of my children have grown up skating. My son played hockey. Decades. We were UWSP Blue Line member clubs. They use that hockey rink. Why break something now that's working and there already? That building is an historic place in the city and needs to stay put and be saved. The gentleman who rents the warming house knew nothing about any of this. He runs his business out of there and is formed of the plans to demolish his...
Lauren, your time, please.
Thank you. I will email all of this. Thank you, guys.
Steve Chizzo, 2525 Price Street. I had a few things to say, as you can see, but I know a lot of people are going to talk about the same thing. So I'm going to be pretty specific to my particular issues. My wife Kathy and I, we've been here 30 years in this house. Raised a family. Obviously, this is a wonderful neighborhood. Who wouldn't want a city park in their backyard? City pool nearby. Our kids walk to grade school. They walk through a park to get to the middle school. Actually, we thought this would be just our starter home, and we've been here 30 years. We're at a point now, though, that we're considering selling. We would love for another family to have the opportunity to raise their children and have the good fortune to grow up in this neighborhood, attend the schools, use the park. I can tell you that may be impossible now. And it's not anything you maybe did intentionally, but your plan, your map, shows two driveways, one on each side of my house, of our house. We have paving on all sides of our house. We've got parking lots slammed up to the fence along all of the properties along our street. You have ruined, potentially ruined, the values of our houses. You have actually possibly made my home unsellable just by showing it on the plan. Well, you ask how? If you notice the plan, it says preferred concept. Everyone that has seen this thinks there's two driveways on each side of my house. We may as well be an island in lava. That's how valuable this property is going to be. This is on your website. This is on Facebook. This is on the screen. This is everywhere. It doesn't say option, alternate, idea. It says preferred concept. Nobody knows that that property isn't yours. They're saying, what are you going to do about having sidewalks and parking lots and driveways next to your house? This is real potential harm to us. Imagine someone coming and looking around and going, great street to live on. How are you going to sell that house? Now again, this is personal. This is my property. This is a big deal for us. This is a big deal for all of the properties on that side of the park. I hope that the property values aren't ruined. But if you look at this, we had views to green spaces. We had kind of scenic views, and now we see sea of parking. There's parking lots everywhere. I'm looking at, actually, I did a quick study. I've seen lots of people playing on the fields, all of the grass fields around there. We had a snowstorm on Saturday. People were playing out in the snow. In the spring, people can't wait to get out there. In the summer, Boys and Girls Clubs everywhere. Kids are everywhere. In the fall, there's football. There's all kinds of activities. How many people play on the parking lots? Maybe this many? Hold up your hand. And now add one more. There's 6 parking lots planned for this park. Now take this away. There's 1 green space, 1 grass, real grass green space. I think that's a shame. I think you need to reevaluate that.
Thank you, sir. Your time is up.
Thanks.
Well, I'm talking up here. I'll take 2 more seconds. And my first comment was going to be to the people on the north side of this project. My name's Josh Kriesel. I live at 2717 Main Street. I live there with my wife, Heather. On that map, I'd be on the south side of this whole plan. I'm fortunate enough, I work from home every day. I'm an insurance adjuster. I get to see people coming and going every day because my desk sits facing the ice rink. So questions you have on who uses it, who comes and goes. Well, I can tell you what I've noticed walking my dogs with my wife around the school, up Price Street and back down. I've noticed people playing tennis, basketball, people at the pool, batting practice, baseball, softball games, clubs such as Ultimate Frisbee, football practice, gym class, them coming in and enjoying the green space, maybe perhaps just have a class, ice skating, of course, during the winter, and most importantly, tailgating. I think it's kind of unique that that's green across my street. Yeah, it might not be a parking lot. It's darn cheap to maintain. I think people enjoy setting up a flag, a barbecue, throwing a football. And with this plan, you're putting a lot of stuff in our community. Numerous parking lots, taking away a bunch of green space, which is really nice. And I just think it needs to come back to the table as to what does the community, specifically our neighborhood, want? And one thing I want to point out is I'm not really a huge fan of domes. I think they look really ugly. I think a lot of cities put them in areas that are in a cornfield where you have space for plenty of parking. They're not the greatest to look at, of course. And I don't know, it just seems odd and out of place in our neighborhood to have a big dome. Rhinelander, theirs is in the middle of nowhere. Chula Vista, down in the Dells, they have theirs down by the Chula Vista Resort, and a big, huge softball, baseball complex down the road. They put them in some of these larger facilities in wide open areas to think about the future, which is growth. Do you need 2 domes down the road? Do you need 6 tennis courts down the road? Because you have a community that's now 75,000 people. I don't want you to limit this project and trying to stuff a bunch of stuff into one area to make it okay for today. 15 years down the road, be like, wait, we need some more space. Where do we go? The ball diamonds, for instance. What are we going to do with that extra ball diamond? It needs to go somewhere because we need to bring a lot of baseball. Baseball is huge around here. What are we going to do with a dome throughout the year? High school or the junior high uses it for gym class? Soccer on the weekends? I mean, how much parking do you need for a large event in a dome like that? Chula Vista's parking is huge. I've been there. Rhinelanders is huge. The parking that you're going to do with 6 little lots is going to accommodate a huge event at that dome. You need to really reconsider how much you're really stuffing into one block in this city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. By the way, you gave an excellent presentation explaining all the details and what is proposed. But let's get back to our community. You know, I heard it tonight, and I've heard other people passionately talk about what it is we want as a community. I've been around here for 30, 40 years, resident. Right now I'm at 3008 Main Street. My name is William Schmidt. And I've watched the transitions take place. We all know that when you build something, that it can become, like he said, in a short period of time, too concentrated We're not looking at down the road what we need to do. There's a couple of things that are really important, I think, right now. First of all, look at our economic situation, not just here, but around the country. Right now, I'm hoping to God we have enough funds to be able to survive over the next few years. There may be some things that might cut these things back. Second thing is, let's take a look at the beauty. I went past there tonight, and that's a hallmark moment. You know what I'm talking about. Just like you said, I looked over there, and there they are, skating. And remember, I brought my kids over there. We skated. I was only a block away from there. I love it. People come by, and they always look at it. You drive by in the summertime, you see the green space over there. You see the people during the ball games when they're doing the, they're outside with their tailgating. They love it. All these different activities, you're going to cram too much into a space, and then down the road, you're going to wish that you had done something different. Save as much of it as you can. We've had some, you've looked at downtown Stevens Point. We put a road around it. I used to work for DOT. So what do? We lost a beautiful post office. We built this big mall, and what happened to it? It fell flat. And now we have to deal with those kind of things. Don't let that happen to this park area. Start to conserve it and look down the road and make sure we have the funds to do it. First of all, this is taxpayer stuff. This is our park. This belongs to the community. These are the people who are going to make the difference. The planners have big ideas. I know all that. It's wonderful to have this idea of all this big dome stuff and everything we can build around it. But we've got other places we can do certain things. Don't put it all in one concentrated area. And I don't like the fact that we're going to start putting out more parking lots, or we want to put out parking lots, pave this over. I like the green space we can keep as much as possible. But you can do improvements. You can make things better. You can improve it. You can talk about the busing. You can talk about the police. You can talk about the fire and safety. All those things are important. Let's concentrate on those first, and then look at other areas you could put some of these things like this aquatic dome. I'd like to see it way east of Stevens Point over by the Holiday Inn. If anything else, there's so much beautiful land out there. So anyway, don't let it consume you. Be very careful as you proceed. Listen to the folks who live in the area. We love it. We love to see that park. We use it. Walk our dogs, you name it. And one other thing, every time you have some activity over there, do you ever notice a couple streets down, park to the right? Those streets, everybody's parking all over in front of their past College Avenue, way down almost to the over by the cemetery. I mean, that's parking that people are already using. That's where they're going right now. And as you increase the activities here, that parking is going to increase. I am concerned about the home values over there.
Thank you, sir. Your time.
Our home values. So, all right. Anyway, that's enough for me. Really be careful, okay? Listen to the people. Thank you.
I'm Meg Erler. I'm 3233 Leahy Avenue. I'm here, I guess the first hat I'm going to put on, I'm the president of Boys and Girls Club. I do want to note that based on the last, the conversations we've had over a number of years, that we are part of the footprint. Boys and Girls Club is really looking to expand support and programming for our teens. It is a priority for our board. The current facility is limited in terms of space. So we, again, as you noted, have a right of first refusal in the event the city would vacate that. I just want the community to understand that that's what it would be. It would be a facility that we would continue to support our elementary, our junior high, but we would be able to provide some targeted programming and support for teens, including workforce development. And so just if anybody has any questions about that, it is a placeholder. We've known from the beginning that depending on what happens with the city, it may come to pass, it may not. But we appreciate that the city has placed it there. I'm going to put my school board hat on. I am one member of the school board. And I just want to note I appreciate the communication ongoing with our administration to really work together to ensure that we're continuing to provide the resources, in particular to PJs in that location, because it is essential, as you said, that our kids have that opportunity for athletics and for gym, FIED, et cetera, et cetera. So again, and tennis, anyway, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Laura Bellinger-Tess, 3201 Oak Avenue in Stevens Point. I'm actually here tonight representing Point Fast Pitch, the Stevens Point Youth Softball Association. And I would like to echo Mr. Disher's comments of, we have 2 fields right now. Goerke Park is the home for Point Fast Pitch, and we need those 2 fields. I mean, we already struggle with just the 2 fields, finding practice times and with everybody else. But we have those 2 fields are operating Monday through Thursday from 5:30 till 9:30 p.m. And they're full all of those nights with the softball games. So if we lose 2 outdoor fields, that will kill the Youth Softball Association. So, I mean, we have the 3 already at Zenoff, but we don't use those now, so we're not gaining anything. We're losing 2 major fields. We also bring in a tournament in July with a large number of organizations outside actually in the tournament, and we couldn't run that tournament without those fields. We already, again, struggle with what we have. We've have our registration open right now, and people are begging to come. We had to cut off, and that was already the end of December, beginning of January. The other thing that is a big, huge component for softball Point Fast Pitch is the concessions. So we run the concessions out of Goerke Field Monday through Thursday and during these tournaments, and that's our only way to make money. The money we collect for registrations basically breaks even for umpires and workers. So we need an opportunity to make money through concessions, and that I haven't heard mentioned at all. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Do I get 3 more minutes for Zena?
Or you can take mine, Greg. Excuse me. My name is Andy Hoff. I live at 2601 Price Street. And I agree with the gentleman before me. Great presentation today. It made a lot of sense and actually cut down a couple of questions. First thing, if any of this were to go through, I think that the home and away stands should be flip-flopped just because of the sun. It's terrible sitting in those stands in the afternoon. Just flip them around, let the visitors sit in the sun, right?
So good in November.
Huh?
Feels good in November.
Is this plan a part of the corp? It is not a part of that at all? Okay. So this doesn't include any property acquisition? No. Okay. Because the corp reads 6 to 10 years on the property acquisition, which I know we're not really talking about here, but it says 6 to 10 years, and that's 2023, so we're already 2 years into that plan. Where are we at with any of that? I mean, we're talking about my house, right in the middle of the proposed property acquisition area is my house. How far is anything regarding the moose in the property acquisition? Is that at any type of conclusion, or, is it?
Go ahead. Essentially, Dave, when the first arrangement in terms of trying to swap lot, like to build the lot and maintain the lot, they said they weren't interested in, and since have said they'd like to sit down again. So that's where it's at. That's why there's 2 concepts on that end.
Fair enough.
Also, I'll just mention, since you asked, related to the corp, There is ranges of timelines, but just know the corp gets updated every 5 years. And I can tell you there's quite a few components in the corp that date back 20 plus years ago that were also listed for that. So I just want to make sure the room's aware. While it might say 6 to 10 years, there's not a house on the street that can be bought essentially at any time by force or eminent domain. Then the parks would never do that. The strategic acquisition piece that was incorporated in that was just if a house goes for sale, just like the city can do whether it's in a plan or not, the city can ultimately make an offer on it.
Fair enough. What date is the board voting on this? Did you say June and July?
At the earliest. So essentially the public feedback, which obviously we're getting quite a bit tonight, but the written comment part is next, and then revisions. If the revisions take 2 months, it could be later. If they take 3, exactly, it doesn't matter. Depends upon how many changes get happening. So at the very earliest, it'd be sometime in the summer.
Okay. They don't make more earth. It's at a minimum. Don't ruin it, right? Don't ruin it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Anybody else?
Hi, I'm going to piggyback off of what a few people said. Great presentation. Like, I'm walking away going, okay, now I kind of see. But I will also mimic that, I'm not so sure. My one, and maybe this is just a suggestion, I know with the Parker Memorial, I think they call it, is that ever been thought of as a lodge rental, like to generate revenue? Talking to some of the people out in the community just the last 2 days, we were talking about what might be happening, and people are you're probably going to get a lot of feedback, I think, which is great. But I've said, that Parker Memorial, all of the lodges in Stevens Point are full all the time. It could be a point of revenue, and that's just a suggestion while we were talking. So again, great presentation. Good luck.
What is your name and address?
Oh, sorry. Christine Karn, 617 Michigan
Thank you,
Avenue.
Christine.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
My name is Tom Fink. I live at 2533 Price Street. So I got my 2 neighbors here, so it's, of course, I have the same issue. My big issue, Steve hit right on it, the parking lot, right behind my house. I know this came up a while back. And then I guess the other issue I have, and property value obviously would be a concern. As far as a dome goes, is that the only place you look to put a dome? No, and that's, I'm not joking. I mean, I go and visit my daughter in Minnesota, and they got domes all over the place. But the last one I went to, actually, the first one I actually went into was last weekend, and it was at a high school. And it just made a lot of sense because you have usually pre-made parking at a high school, and then you might not have to worry so much about, well, I might not have to worry so much about the parking issue, but I do appreciate what you're doing. I know a lot more now. I appreciate my neighbor for filling me in, and I will follow this, and I hope it doesn't, the parking lot goes away someplace.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Last time.
Can I go speak?
Online, Trevor.
Oh, go ahead.
Trevor, floor is yours.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, cool. There I am. Hey. Yep. Thanks, Chair and Dan. Trevor Rourke, 601 Washington Avenue. First, thanks to the director for the phone call today. It was good to get more background info and details about the feedback from the user groups and mobility strategies within Goerke Park. Second, there's definitely some cool sports and activity facilities planned in this concept, supportive of most of these. especially the aquatic center, pickleball courts, playground, et cetera. I'll probably be using a bunch of those with my kids, like I usually do at Goerke. Yet when I looked at the concept for the first time, I thought, whoa, that's a lot of pavement. If you actually look at the concept and you placed all those parking lots together into one single block, it ends up being close to 20 to 25% of the entire park land. That's a lot, right? Also, I didn't understand where the trees went. When we have opportunities to create park space, trees should be kind of top priority, but there's only just a few scattered about next to parking lots. So I thought that was interesting. So if we actually value land, people's health, our climate, and even safety, then we should really build the minimum amount of pavement we need. We're basing our projections of parking demand on the minimum pavement of parking requirements within the zoning code and neighbors' complaints. It's actually a long-known strategy that doesn't work. If you just look around the city right now, today, any day of the week, you'll see plenty of parking lots that sit, not vacant, but highly underutilized on a daily basis again. We have a long history of overbuilding in this city, and it's not unique to Stevens Point. This is all over the United States. But what this does is it increases transportation demand. In other words, it induces driving. So in other words, because of this off-street parking and all these new roads that would be inside the park itself, the traffic problem would get worse. It'd be less safe. It would be louder. I haven't heard anybody talk about that. It would be louder within the park. And then kids from PJs who normally just walk over, they now would have to cross a roadway just to get to Goerke Park, no matter what. So parkland really should be protected as natural as possible and people-centric. It should be comfortable, safe, quiet, and peaceful. Roadways are none of those, and parking lots are also none of those. Instead of the current concept's mobility layout, I'd recommend we replace these roads and adjacent sidewalks with large multi-use paths, possibly 12 feet wide or so. A lot of cities do this, and it's very comfortable, very fun. The amount of money this will also save in construction costs is massive. Instead of roads and sidewalks, you have multi-use paths.
Trevor, your time is up. Thank you. Your time is up.
Thank you so much.
All right. Anybody else?
I'd rather have just sat where I was than come up here. Kim Fires, 1217 Minnesota Avenue. And I just want to say that, you know, I'm glad that you mentioned when you're going to be including the community and our opinions. I think it's really sad what is happening to all the people on Price Street. Actually, Main Street and Minnesota as well, because, I mean, I just spent a lot of money putting some new stuff on the front of my house to stare at a parking lot. I hope you keep the ice rink. Again, I walked there, I skated. My grandfather taught hockey in that hockey rink. And, you know, the hockey rink is a place that kids, it's hard to get ice time, first of all. And second of all, it's a place that kids come to that could be out drinking or they could be doing all this other stuff, and instead they're there playing hockey. I like all the ideas that you guys have, and I think it's great that we're working on all these outdoor physical activities, you know, getting people out instead of spending too much time in their homes. And so that's just all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, one last time. Anybody else like to speak? All right. right. Well, thank you, everybody, for speaking. We value your comments, and again, this is just a preliminary idea. I guess I'll share a little bit myself. I grew up on the corner of Minnesota and Minnesota and Maine, and I spent a lot of years on that ice rink, Parker Building, and all those areas, football fields. When I saw the plan, I guess I am a little bit concerned with the parking, all the additional, like I believe was Trevor mentioned, about 25% of that land is, being put into blacktop, and that does concern me. But I think also a lot of people realize we need to put a new aquatic center, swimming pool or whatever, and the footprint's going to be a much larger area. And I think we do need to move it or think about readjusting it. Now's the time if we're going to put all that money into that aquatic center. Is there a better place to put it within the park? I'm sorry to say, the ice skating rink and everything else, the hockey rink, for instance, we're using it for what? This year, maybe 4 weeks out of the year, and that structure sits there the other 11 and a half months out of the year where it's not being used, so the space isn't being utilized very well, as well as the Parker Building. I mean, I remember going there as a young kid, Santa visiting there and other things. Now the building's not used for anything except storage. I'm all for looking at other uses for it or whatever, but maybe, can it be moved or something else? But again, it's using space that has other values, that we could use it for. So, again, anybody else?
I just have a couple questions, or Dan, for you to clarify. To Trevor's point, in terms of what appears to be 25% in blacktop, some of this blacktop exists already, correct?
Correct. So lot 13 would be brand new, and lot 1 would be brand new. Everything else is existing. The one question that did get brought to me via phone today was about what I'll call the grayed out parking, which is around the police department today. What that just means is that it wouldn't be reconstructed. So the darker, the dark asphalt would be new build, but 21 is a little bit of a reconfiguration. It shows 105 stalls and a drop-off lane. I believe there's about 112 stalls there currently because there is no drop-off lane. One other thing in that, not to make this long-winded, but the school district currently has a large area in front of PJ's where there's bollards and there's a bunch of asphalt. Mm-hmm. So the reason that it didn't go down significantly in stalls is when we met with them, they thought that space could be closer to the building and the bollards can move.
Okay. So I guess one of the things to consider is what new asphalt needs to be put down. And I guess the other thing, just as it's kind of got buried in the elements to this, but this reconfiguration could eliminate a significant public safety concern around the school. Drop off, buses on the street. So please don't, I encourage folks, and we really do appreciate your feedback. The reality is, though, there are a number of elements that are going to address some concerns. And as we continue forward with this feedback, one of them is having buses on Michigan, cars stacked up on Michigan, and if you look, there may be a way to actually avoid what could be a tragic accident somewhere down the road. So I just want to throw that out there for consideration.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes?
I just want to, I guess, go back to the softball stuff. I agree as well. You can't lose 2 fields to add 1. As long as I'm the commissioner for USA Softball in Wisconsin, and tournaments are growing. And we have a good asset here. So, yes, if we lose 2, we need to put 2 back or put 3 back.
Thanks. Liz?
Just one other comment. When you do look at this in total in the Goerke Park area, that dome really does take up a lot of space. I'm not saying that the dome is a bad idea, but I'm not sure that this is a good location for it. We've got spaces around town like the Edgewater property or other places that are not currently being used that maybe we could look at for a location for a dome that might be more well-suited, or someone mentioned near the high school or something like that too. There might be a better spot for it than in Goerke. Thanks.
Yes, Mike?
Yeah, looking at this plan, I was just trying to figure out how much new activity are we adding in that's not there already. It looks like that dome area is taking up a little more space than currently with the 2 fields.
So no. So actually, if you look at it, essentially, imagine there's 2 softball diamonds there today, and they face the infields face. If you look at this, it's on a this is what, a northeast orientation and a southwest. So imagine where the Parker building sits today. If you went and drew a straight line through that hockey rink, that's almost the exact divider of where the aquatic center would move into kind of the overflow parking, and then putting, if it was a dome, a roof over the other side. So to the park commissioners and the public's comments, let's just say that the dome idea didn't float, right? Turf is still probably something that this commission is going to need to weigh, right? Because certainly the turf would allow the softball sports to play, but the truth is that field is used so heavily because of FIAD, because of ultimate frisbee, because of the football after school, youth softball. That is a really heavy athletic area, no doubt. And while you can play 2 softball games inside of that, again, youth softball told us, we met with their president, had a lengthy discussion. That'd be great for them in cold weather months, but in warm weather months they'd have to move if they did that, because they'd lose those 2 fields essentially. I think it's semantics, arguing 2 and 1. It is, because there's still 2 fields here. So I'm not in a position at all, I never will, to argue it, because there's a lot of ways to look at this. And please know, I think everything is flexible, right? The things that user groups say about like a dome structure being here is that when you have all these events, they're busing kids to the football field already. Soccer's here, track is here. PJ's has a number of sport athletic. This is already kind of the athletic complex. Community park, because it is cell phone ping shows, not counting the school, not counting the PD, around 300,000 people that come through this park already. There is no doubt when this aquatic center, if it's larger goes, you're going to draw that number far north of that. And if you do a 12-month enclosed facility, dome, whatever you'd call it, that number's going to go further north. So heavy usage here, no doubt, and you would be adding new activities, especially when it's normally under snow cover or something like that went in. And also, as you look at it, if the dome didn't go in, there's still opportunities, I think, to still improve the area too. It could be maybe stay as grass, or it could just become some sort of turf facility as well. So the one nice part about how long this process will take is I think we can go a lot of different directions. One thing I will need to know from this park commission tonight, though, is just, do you want to have more comments on, or do you want to take something off, right? And again, we've got user group feedback, and you're always going to have user groups that don't live there have maybe a different opinion than those that live there, and both opinions are equal, right? You have to look at both and weigh both pros and cons. And I do want to mention as well, it will take likely a lifetime to do some componentry of this plan, what it costs. So what I need is, I want the park to succeed. And obviously, I want to live past this plan for many years, working for and serving the city of Stevens Point and all the residents. So I want us to land in a place, just like all of you do, where people like what we're doing. And you're not going to make everybody happy, but we want overall positive feelings. I certainly heard the comments. I think that I'd recommend to the board we do immediately is change the verbiage about drafts and things to Mr. Chisel's points. Obviously, as we work with a consultant, that just got overlooked in terms of something that got public. Obviously not being adopted, but that's a quick change that we certainly can do before we would mail it out and we would do public input. And I'd offer that as an apology sincerely to any neighbors that was not the intent. But I could totally see that part of it, and it shouldn't be that way. It should say something like possible, conceptual, and we can easily correct that. But the bigger elements, I guess I'll ask you, 11, to kind of give me direction on is, do you want something turned off, or do you want something redrawn before more public feedback is kind of gathered in writing?
Yeah, my other thing, is that the best place for the aquatic center? Or maybe it shouldn't be in Goerke. Maybe it should be at another place. I mean, it's, it just seems like we're putting everything crammed in one place. I mean, there is a lot of empty space around this city. There's empty buildings that, I think we should look at it.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think swimming pool within the inner city would be a best spot for it versus the dome, and I think there's many other areas where that could be moved out, as one of the people mentioned with the parking lot. I mean, I prefer not to see this whole, 25%, 50% of it filled with blacktop. I think the dome should be taken off and moved somewhere else, leave the softball diamonds there. We do need, my 30-plus years on this commission, we've always got complaints in the fall with football, people parking on the street. Obviously, the neighbors don't want the cars in front of their house, so I think now's the time to some type of parking. The most logical spot is where the ice rink is right now. But I think, other things need to be moved around, and we can, adjust that as we go. But I think the dome should be removed, and, you know, aquatic center, I think maybe plans of really what we want. Do we want a swimming pool? Do we want lazy river? What do we want? What's the community need? And that can, I think we can build around that as that idea, but I really would like that in this area. I mean,
Put it back where it was, if that's what your plans were all this time.
Correct.
Now, I appreciate it. Thank you, John.
but I mean, as far as the Willet, we're not going to move the Willet. We're not moving the football field. I mean, those are our set areas, and
That's why we live
Right.
there. We love that.
correct. Thank you. All right.
So I guess I'm going to double check that. So is everyone in the, I guess I'm just going to ask, is the dome something that you all would like turned off?
I have serious concerns about the dome being there. I
Yeah.
think it's something that is definitely needed in this community, but I have concerns about being located in this place, and especially because I think a lot of the concerns that we heard tonight could be rectified if the dome was not actually set in Goerke.
I think, though, if you get rid of the dome, keep that as a turf area, it does get beat up pretty heavily. Soccer, ultimate frisbee, like you said, everything that uses it, the grass by the end of the summer is pretty beat up. So to turn that into a turf facility makes a lot of sense, just not have a roof over it.
Is that sprinkler? No.
Well, the school needs that for activities.
Yeah, for gym class and.
Yeah, they're out there all the time when you drive by.
I guess a question I have about that dome, Dan, you mentioned the school district. What does the school district gain if there's a dome? And is it worth, I guess the question is then, does it justify continuing to keep it?
So obviously, I can't speak for the district, right? But the feedback we've gotten is that, you know, they certainly have explored dome structures in the past too. And again, I can't speak for the Boys and Girls Club. I think they had even talked about a structure at one time too. They saw it as a net positive in the administration, right, the people we met with, not a, you know, public process at that point. But they saw it as a positive, as it's basically another closed-in classroom, you know, that they can use during the day. The thing that a dome does do too for all the cold weather months, if something like that is constructed, is you can drop netting. So imagine instead of it sitting under snow, you'd have potentially 4 to 6 user groups that could be in there from 3 p.m. until say 10 p.m. But like you said, ultimately, you know, I will tell you that on the drawing, it's definitely different than walking in the park. If you walk out there, it is a large space. But there's no doubt that, you know, it's not, this isn't like a 7-field complex like you might see, you know, in some of these larger structures that go in. So I think the benefit that they basically saw is that if they still can run their FIAB programs, if their athletic teams can still practice there, and then if you do pick up all those months of indoor space that, you know, to be frank, we're not operationally planning this. We're not designing it, right? These are just concepts. But if you get into that discussion about, well, how do you run something like this? You would need the university to be a participator and somebody that's pledging operationally, right? You'd probably need the school district to be a participator and a pledger to it. Likely all of the park users would have to be putting money into it, and you'd have to program the space basically anytime it's available. What the other communities are saying, if you see the reports, is that once they build them, they're swarmed with people in them, no doubt. So that's why it is I don't know what the right answer is on that part. I can tell you that if it's covered, it's going to get used. But if it's not covered, it doesn't change how the space functions today. Turf certainly allows it to be used, you know, a little earlier in the year, and you don't have to do you save on some of the water. But it certainly changes the feel too if you walk across it, right? Dogs aren't going to be able to be thrown around, you know, if they're going to the bathroom on and things like that. Those are going to be problems, right? Like, we're going to have to do some different things there, but it would allow it to not require some of the same maintenance. We'd have to groom it, but it would change the feel slightly in that regard. But again, a lot of the things that would go on from the month of, say, late March typically into, you know, November could be played on it without a covering.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I mean, I guess I'll put my 2 cents in. I talked to, I don't know, probably 24 people from around the county, around the community, this being a community park, not just a neighborhood park. And the number one thing everybody said was, oh, good, finally a dome. I personally, and I'm hearing a lot of, like, maybe that's the first thing we would remove, taking it to public comment. I would like to see public comment on that.
Yeah.
So I don't think now is the time to remove that. If we're going to have the discussion, let's have the discussion. And that's just my 2 cents on it.
If I could jump on what Sean said, that's my point. I think we don't know enough about what the users might plan. If the district has indicated an interest and a need for it, I'd like to know what it is before we pull it off. Because once we pull this off, we're not going back. This is a concept. This is if everything lined up the way it could, funding to to the comment before about tax dollars, I mean, we have a number of elements that are already in this park that were not funded solely by tax dollars. So we have a mechanism and a history with this department and going out and leveraging partners so there isn't a huge burden on the taxpayers. Some of these things are already in the capital budget plans for the next 5 years. But I'm a little concerned. I would like to know more about how it's used before we pull it off. And if there's multiple users that have expressed that it's a good idea, then tell us why it's a good idea. And that would be part of the public comment.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I do think there's a lot to like, particularly on the west side of this concept with the rerouting around PJ's. I'm a parent of a child at PJ's now, and the traffic around there is really frightening. So I do think there are elements there that I'm really excited about. I do understand the concerns about too much parking. I mean, it's a push-pull situation. We're hearing there's not enough parking, there's too much parking, there's too much parking on the streets. And I get that. That's a really delicate balance to do. So ideally, yes, I would like to see less parking if we're able to do that. Like John, I really agree that it makes a lot of sense to have the pool here. These are very densely populated neighborhoods. There's a lot of families, there's a lot of students. There's a lot of retirees who use the pools. There's a lot of people walking and biking to this park, which again, the more people you can get walking and biking here, the less people you have parking and needing parking spaces and parking on the street. So, and again, once BGC heavily uses the pool in the summer. Other school groups, church groups, and it's just, it's very centrally located in our city. And, for a city, a lot of our parks are located on the edge of town. There's not a lot of parks in the center of the city where the majority of the people live. So, those are just some thoughts that I have.
Thanks, Ginger. Liz, did you?
Yeah, I agree with one of the comments that was made earlier. I think it would be premature to pull anything out right now. A lot of time and effort and thought went into putting this together, and I think it would be really important for us to get general community comments before we start pulling things. There's some things that some of us don't like very much about it, including the folks in the audience, but I think, we'll have an opportunity to discuss those further as we get down the line.
All right, thanks. Anybody else?
So would general consensus be we change some verbiage right off the bat? Maybe I could talk to the renderer to have some graying of basically the areas that are completely up in the air, right? The Price Street side, maybe the parking lot additions, and have obviously anything that states preferred, which should have never been on their start, to draft. I think those unilaterally everybody's in agreement with? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then ultimately what would result then, if that's the case, if that's the changes we make, is again, the directly adjoining neighbors would get a letter, but then we will do a press release with a date stating when to come. Very similar kind of run through of both parks renderings with written comments, certainly verbally too, but the nice part about written is it can be cataloged. So we can kind of bunch them by category. If there's Parker-builded comments, parking, whatever it is, and you'll get kind of a quantified data part of that. That all sound reasonable to the board based on where we're at?
Yep.
All right.
I did tell a gentleman I'd come back to a question. Did you have a question I didn't answer earlier that you'd like me to answer now?
I was just curious on the dome and the whole high school use of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I work looking across the street. So during the summer, they use those green spaces to play soccer, lacrosse, all of that stuff. I don't know necessarily their use during the school year when they have a gymnasium. They can now play soccer in a winter month when normally they play it in the spring. Like the gym teacher's going to control those activities for those kids, and to have a large structure like that for them to use it for like gym class literally only, and if it's overflow for an actual classroom of sorts, I think that's a school district issue versus in our community, let's use a park, which is for our citizens issue, you know?
Yeah.
That's my only comment.
No, that's a fair comment. And I can give a short explanation. So I mentioned gym classes just in the fact that that space is their outdoor gym class, or if I had physical education class. That's just one component of it. So again, conceptually, what it means, if we drill back even further for the general public, the concept just ultimately means if funding and an operational plan and a business plan and all the users came together and said, we can afford to build it, we can afford to run it, if it's on a drawing of this nature, it basically allows something like that to go forward. The city, I won't speak for the school district, but the school district, any of the users, if it can't sustain itself, it just wouldn't be built, just because there'd be staff needed for something like that too, and the actual business plan would follow a concept, right? Concept says, hey, it could fit here, it could be done, but then getting into how do we pay for it, how do we operate it, who's in it, what times, that really is built out over a period of time before you construct it. Really today, like I mentioned in my first part of my presentation, we're really conceptual about all of the things have been thrown at our department about we should expand this, we should build this, you should do this now. The plan is to build to say, you're not on it, it's not possible, right? Or, hey, it is on it, maybe we can, let's explore it further. So I will just reassure everybody, even if we get to a stage where something gets adopted and it's drawn here, I'll even talk about a 50,000 square foot aquatic center. If you're talking a $10 million aquatic center, it's gonna determine, because that's what they are, just so everybody's aware, they can run anywhere between 8 to 10, even $12 million when you get into something like that. It doesn't get done unless you have pretty unilateral users and community that say, hey, we want that, and then really the financial means to do it. So that doesn't make anybody, I understand, like, plans are, they go on shelves and things like that, and stuff like this will certainly get some traction, but the full programming stuff would come in greater detail significantly to this whole board, common council, long before that part could move forward. So even if this concept does show, same thing with like parking lot specifics, this is just the best guess at some stalls. But when you get into stormwater retention, you get into the tree landscape and all the other elements that go into it, those things sometimes shrink and change and get modified. But the concept just allows us to know, like, hey, if and when an aquatic center gets built, this is where it could sit. If and when we were to put a turf field in, this is where it could sit. This is how it could be covered. Operationally, though, all the outdoor activities would still move to what's labeled as number 8. So I can tell you, the school said it too. If it's beautiful outside, the fire teachers want to go out on the grass, right? The youth football would rather be outside if they can too. But anytime you have severe weather events or you have, lack of space in field houses and things of that nature, that's where all the overflow could go. Talking to the university, they have practices till 2 o'clock in the morning on their campus with all their club sports. Them too, they said if they were part of this, they would never do it till 2 here. Our parks close at 11. But ultimately, something of that magnitude, wherever it is in the city, if they're part of it, some of that overflow would shift into these facilities if their programs could go into it. And that's why our community, all walks of our community have all come back to this idea of building a dome structure. It's because there's a huge need here. And I can tell you, I've not lived here nearly long enough to know exactly where that should go. And that's why I welcome all everybody's thoughts on the 11 that help advise me, as well as the community, because our whole goal here is to make sure people feel good about it when we're done, wherever we do build it. So.
All right. Yes, Josh?
One more comment, please.
Yes, Josh?
Does the city, I'm talking about the top property there where there's the 2 driveways that come and go, does the city actually own the property to the right?
The left, just the western,
Just the left?
2517.
Just the left. When I first saw this, I was like, literally, that sucks to be the island.
Hello?
It's obviously been seen, and it's a concept of the city, but technically the city does not own that property to the left. Thus, I question if you can have a concept on some property you don't own for the sake of this homeowner, but moving it being only one single lane and removing the right from the plan altogether. That way this homeowner has time to do whatever he needs to do.
Well, I think Dan is going to address that with how the plan is presented, because it's a valid point. Whenever you're doing urban planning, you want driveways in intersections. So that makes sense. But no, they don't own the property. So it's almost, it's incorrect to show it the way it's shown.
That's true. The point.
Yeah.
You're incorrectly showing something you don't technically own.
Yeah,
Plus,
that should be on it.
All right.
Literally say, like, this is how it's going to look, because you can't take away that property, like you said.
All right. Thank you for your comment. All right.
One other thing, I'm sorry. Did the dome footprint get put on Zenoff Park at all? Because Zenoff is essentially not used in the winter at all. And I know it comes with parking. You're showing that other field. Would it come out?
I think we should take those discussions to separate of maybe the group. Absolutely. I think it's great question, but rather than kind of back and forth, because technically we should make everybody go to the podium. No, it's all good. That's what I get paid for. But I don't want to shortchange going to the podium and all.
Thank you for everybody. We enjoyed your information, and we'll go. So thank you very much. All right. Continue.
I just want to make sure I got it captured though, right? So the verbiage changes, like the gray out, rest of it will stay as is.
We're still going.
Yeah, tell me.
Meeting is still going, folks. Excuse me. So item number 7, we'll continue with the director's report.
All right. Gotta grab my agenda here. Thanks, John. All right, so on the director's report, I do have to give an update on the press box itself. As you recall, we have a capital budget item that was to try to change the roof and reclad the exterior of the press box. The press box goes back to when it was constructed in 1980. It was non-climate controlled. The press box, if you imagine it, actually can be picked up off of the bleachers. So the bleachers were constructed in the 40s. That is a stick-built structure on top of it. And when the building inspectors reviewed the plan documents to make the updates we intended to make, they realized and flagged that it's not insulated. And by building code and today's standards, you cannot climate control the space, which was done in 2002, without it meeting the energy code and being insulated. Had it been insulated in 2002, when it was apparently, when they took the permit out to climate control it, we would be able to use what it is today, but since there's no insulation, it requires one of two options. Option one is to not climate control it, and because of the time of years it's done, that's really not a viable option. Option two is to reconstruct a portion of it, right? So you can imagine, if you could take the exterior T111 siding off and fill the cavities, you maybe can put it back on and try to make that work. If the cavities aren't large enough, you'd end up framing inside the building. I should have Steve give this presentation, be better at it. But he's an architect, by the way. Anyways, you can frame inside, move the walls, and then try to insulate on the inside. So where we're at here is we now have reached a critical juncture where we have to price what a new structure would be in comparison to the reno on the existing one.
Can you just blow an insulation? I mean, I did that at my house. My first house was built in the 1900s and had required a lot more holes, but we were able to insulate it that way.
Potentially, but the roof is not insulated, the flooring's not insulated, the whole structure is just plywood, right? So that's part of the evaluation that we're working through right now is, the short answer is maybe, I don't know that for sure, and that's what we have Raymaker, the architect, working on. So where we're at is we are not out for bid like we would have been, and it's a double-edged sword. I'm really appreciative that the inspectors, had a discussion with us and we reviewed it. We caught it now. You'd hate to have awarded a contract and be really down this road, but I'll tell you, it's certainly going to be a bump in the road here as we try to get ready for fall athletics. So where I'm at is I'll give you an update when I know more. If we end up having to rebuild it or take this one out, put a different one in, there's more discussions to be had. So nothing worth doing is done quickly, I guess. But this is another structure that's quite dated, right? It was in '80, then they added on to it. There's also some doors. What I'm told is that there used to be metal gates at the top of the steps. Somebody crawled through the gates and kicked the doors in. So at the time, I guess they just put the exterior doors where the gates were. That is not code compliant. They shouldn't have been there. So they have to come out too. And then exterior doors have to go on the entrance of the press box. So we just received that information about 10 days ago. So we'll continue to dig into it and then we'll go from there. On a positive news item, though, we were presented the award last week for the Seramur Park project. That award does hang in the lobby, so kudos to us. Not just me, we have to see this whole board.
Architect Steve Chisholm.
Go ahead if you'd like to. Yep, go ahead.
Steve Chisholm, 2525 Price Street. It is kind of awkward, right? I was just talking about Goerke and railing on Goerke, and here we are talking about Seramur. I'm not schizophrenic, right? I was going to title my little talk here, Way to Go, Now Let's Talk More About Goerke, but I'll pass on that. In case you didn't know, I'm an architect with Ellis Construction. We were invited to design and build a shelter building as part of Phase 3 of the project. And I'd like to thank the park planning group for asking us along for the ride. It was great to be involved. And I want to use the success of the Seramur project to highlight that each design project is different from each other. Each project has different challenges and opportunities. Each is mutually exclusive of the others, even if the same players are involved. The scale of the Seramur project and the Goerke projects are not at all similar. But we need to look at that trophy on the shelf, right? The Seramur project is a great trophy sitting on the shelf. And we need to remember why this project was successful and apply that to Goerke. And I know you're already doing this, right? 1,000 hours of meetings, et cetera. The success was based on community involvement and leadership, collaboration, communication, coordination. And these things lead to commendations and now congratulations. I'm not sure how many awards like this are given out, but it is worthy of our congratulations. And I also hope that this award for Seramur Park is just one of many coming for the city. So congratulations on all your diligent work on this.
Thank you, sir.
And many more, right?
Thank you.
And with that, if you do come to the lobby, you will see the award. And I will also tell you that with the recent snow that we've got, we were able to open the sledding hill here this last weekend, which is great. Steve and his crew and Paul have been working hard on that, and we're hoping to see, I don't want to say this out loud, but if we can potentially open the toboggan slide, we're attempting. So, I'm getting a thumbs up in the back, so they must have made good work today. Again, it's going to be a short-lived season being in February with the sun being what it is, but.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
50 below next week.
But I will say with the extra work, it's nice to be able to open it just because last year we really didn't get open at all. So we'll give you a more thorough report. I'll have Paul come and later on, but we'll try to get through this winter season first. So with that, that's all I have for the director's report.
Thank you. Good job. So, all right. Any other comments? Otherwise, I'm looking for a
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, sir. We'll see you next month.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.